Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. If you've just joined us, the weather report from Rock Hill as we had a dusting of snow, and now it's all starting to go away. It should be all gone within a few hours, but it is beautiful. This morning, I just want to follow up a little bit, kind of a carry on over from some of the things we talked about last week. We were talking about the problem of evil. If God is so good, why does evil exist? And the different ways that theology and philosophy have tried to satisfy that question. But today, what strikes me is a quote from the New Testament from Matthew chapter 7, and it's verse 14, if you want to look it up as we go along or later in the day. And I have to paraphrase. There's many different translations, and they each kind of come at it a different way. But in general, Jesus was talking. This occurs during the Sermon on the Mount, and we have to remember that the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount is what biblical scholars believe is the essence of what Jesus taught himself. So when we are looking at what is called Christianity, when we're looking at Christianity, we have to say, well, there's what Jesus taught, and Jesus taught about the kingdom. And then there is the teaching about Jesus. And we have to be clear when we're listening to a talk, or we're reading or studying. We have to kind of ask ourselves now, are they talking about what Jesus taught, or are they telling us something about Jesus himself? But Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is kind of the boiled down, essential. Excuse me, let me just see if somebody's trying to tell me that we've got a problem on a bridge here. No, we're good. It is the boiled down, essential teaching of what Jesus taught. And let me get rid of this here. I'm so sorry. My apologies. I've got to turn that phone off. All right, now we'll get rid of that. So if you want a good primer on the Sermon on the Mount, on the essence of what Jesus himself taught, I suggest that we get boy, this is annoying. I suggest that we get I'm just going to have to let it wear itself out. There it goes. All righty, we're back. So the Sermon on the Mount is the essence of what Jesus himself taught. And Emmett Fox did an excellent job of writing a book called The Sermon on the Mount. And he kind of takes the essence of the teaching of Jesus and kind of relates it to what we study in metaphysics, in New Thought. It just shows how the two are very much aligned. So I want you to keep in mind that this quote that we're talking about today comes from Matthew 7. So it is something that Jesus himself taught. And in the conversation where they were going, Jesus was telling the people assembled at his feet. Get the picture of Jesus standing on the side of the hill, and the people were kind of sitting, maybe up the hill, maybe down the hill, but they were sitting so that they could each see him, right? And he was teaching. And this is the very meaning of the Indian teachings, the Upanishads. An Upanishad is a teaching received at the feet of the master. So we have this teaching, and in the course of the teaching, he's telling people, he says, the gate to destruction is wide. The gate to destruction is wide. But small is the gate, and narrow is the path of life, and few will find it. Narrow is the gate. Small is the gate, narrow is the path of life, and few will find it. So I had to stop and think about that as we were kind of preparing for today. What does this mean? Small is the gate, narrow is the path, few will find it. How does that apply to what we study in metaphysics and in New Thought? Now, years ago, when I was in a traditional teaching, I would kind of take that verse and kind of put it in the context of others, which seemed to me at the time, it seemed to go along with it, which is many are called, but few are chosen. And even in some denominations, some religious denominations, they take the book of Revelations literally, and there's a verse in there somewhere that says only 144,000 people are going to heaven, or some number like that. And they believe that literally to be true, that there's only a few people who are going, few souls that are going to make it to heaven. And it seemed, in looking back, it seemed at the time that the way that I was interpreting this is that this place called heaven, which in my way of thinking at the time was a place, somewhere that we go. It's not easy to get to. It's hard. It's difficult. The gate is small. The path is narrow. Many people won't find it. Many are called, few are chosen. But now I have to look at it a little bit differently. See, when we were talking about the problem of evil last week, we've got to stop and think, how did that make sense? Even if it's supposed to make sense, we have this loving God, this creator that made us out of itself, then somehow allowed us, in full knowledge that we were going to do it, allowed us to stumble and fall, and then is going to condemn us to suffer for eternity because of the mistakes that we made. And we say, well, that didn't make sense. But then we're told, well, there's this plan for salvation, that somehow the Son of God was going to come and was going to suffer vicariously in place of everybody else, and everybody then could get to heaven. But the gate is narrow. The gate is small. The path is narrow. Many are called, few are chosen. And it's just kind of putting that all, kind of sorting through that and putting that all together, Many are called, few are chosen. The gate is small. So why would the divine, in the first place, create us out of itself, allow us to be condemned to suffer forever, give us a way of getting out of that trouble, but then call many and choose few, then establish a small gate and a narrow path? It would seem that the divine has created us out of itself for itself and would want us all to be with it, to be in joy with it, to be in a place in consciousness known as heaven, the place in consciousness which is the awareness of the presence of God, living in the bliss of the constant communion with the presence of God. So today I want to look at these things just a little bit differently. I want to come at them just slightly differently. And to me now, looking at it, see, I don't think that it's God who's doing the choosing. This many are called and few are chosen doesn't mean that God is the one doing the choosing. But we are the ones doing the choosing. In Old Testament times, we were told that the Jews were the chosen people, that God had chose them. And then later, as I came to study, I read, can't remember which teacher it was reading, but it says the Jews were the chosen people because they chose God. They chose God. They were the chosen people. So at the time, if you think about, 4,000 years ago or so, at the time when the Old Testament comes to us, there were many different gods, many different concepts of God. Each tribe, each community had its own set of gods. There were gods for every purpose under heaven. And then Moses comes along and says, no, there's only one. And of course, that idea was not original to him. That idea existed in the Egyptian temples where he studied. But nevertheless, he made it popular, and the Jewish people accepted it. They chose God. They chose God. So here we are thousands of years later, and we are faced with a similar situation. There are many, many different things that we could be giving our attention to. Many different schools of thought, many different religions, many different philosophies, many distractions. And we have to choose. We have to choose. So it is up to us to choose. See, I would say more than many are called. I would say everyone is called. Everyone is created out of the divine. Everyone has the essence of the divine within. Everyone is an individualized expression of the divine. And it is inevitable that someday we will awaken to that. And so in that regard, we are all called. In Buddhism, for example, the concept exists that all sentient beings are the Buddha. That is, all sentient beings have the Buddha consciousness, but not all have awakened to the Buddha consciousness yet. All are in the process of awakening. All are in various stages of spinning round and round and round in the wheel of life until each one eventually reaches enlightenment. And the choice for someone in that teaching then is now the time? Is this the lifetime? Is this the time when we turn away from all of the other things that are going on in life and turn to the spiritual development and make enlightenment the top priority, and then maintain the focus on it? Remember, we get from the East the visual of do not seek God unless you're seeking God as you would a pond if your hair was on fire. Is this the most important thing in your life? Is it to the exclusion of all else? Is this the most important thing? And then we have in Christianity the concept of the Christ consciousness. That the Christ consciousness is that consciousness where the human and the divine meet, where each person can eventually recognize that it is not they, but it is the Spirit within that does the works. It is the very presence of God showing up as them, animating them, that the life that they are is not something that was created from the soil, and it is not an accident, but the very life, the very soul that they are is some part of the divine. And can we arrive at that place in consciousness where we understand that the ground that we stand on is holy ground? We understand that our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit, that the very presence of the divine is here with us. And again, the choice becomes, do I want to maintain focus on that? Do I want to keep my attention on the presence? Do I want to grow spiritually every day? Or do I want to be engaged in all of the many diversions that the world offers to me? You know, the saying is that, you can go back to Matthew, it says, the gate to destruction is wide. And I altered that a little bit when I was reading it. The gate to distraction is wide. The gate to distraction is wide. I mean, think of all of the things that are commanding our attention. We tried to have a talk this morning, and my phone starts ringing. Annoying. I couldn't turn it off. It kept beeping. Think of all the things that just do that to you, that just demand your attention. You go on your computer to look up something, and the web pages have all of these little things that are flashing at you to try to gain your attention. You try to turn on the TV to watch the news, and the newscasters come out in a very empathetic voice, just, you know, something really important is going to happen here. And in most days, it's not really that important anyway. They've even gone to putting music behind the news now and putting drum beats softly or lowly in the background. Some of the TV commercials, you try to watch a TV commercial or listen to a commercial on the radio while you're driving a car, and they got police sirens and fire sirens and cell phone sounds and all of these different things that people are doing to kind of, excuse me, reach out and grab you and shake you by the collar and say, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. Last night we were flipping through the channels after supper, and every channel was a basketball game. And I don't have anything against basketball. If you enjoy basketball, that's wonderful. But that's all there was. That's all there was one game after another game after another game. No choice on all the broadcast channels, which is what we get. Basketball was it. If you didn't want basketball, then you had to go to Netflix or something else. We go from one sports season to another sports season. No matter what time of the year it is, you can invest your whole day just watching, just flipping from one game to another. So we have all of these distractions. We have all of these things that we could give our attention to. And the human mind loves to flit. The human mind loves to jump from one place to another place to another place. Right? This is why the teachers called it the little grasshopper mind, little grasshopper. The mind just jumps from here to here to here to here. But that's not progress. See, that's not progress on the spiritual path. It may keep us busy. It may be interesting. It may be amusing. But that's not progress on our spiritual path. And even when we decide, sometimes, even when we decide that our spiritual path is what's important to us, that coming to know the presence of God in our lives is what is truly important to us, even then, our patterns of flitting from one to another and being distracted stay with us. So we go from one church to another church, or from one book to another book, or from one retreat to another retreat, or from one teacher to another teacher. And we get little bits and pieces here and there. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not as effective as focused attention, focused practice. See, the gate to distraction is wide. The gate to distraction is absolutely wide. But but small is the gate, and narrow is the path that leads to life. And few will find it. We don't find it because we're looking in the wrong places. Because we're following the crowd through the wide gate is what we're doing. Did you ever go to like a fair or an air show or some event where you have to park your car way out in the middle of nowhere in a big open field somewhere, and you park your car there, and you're not exactly sure which way to walk, which way are you going to get to the gate? I mean, the place you're going is so far away you can't even see it. So what do? Well, you just start following the crowd, right? Well, everybody's walking to your right, so, well, I'll get to the right and I'll walk with them as well, I'll follow them. And you're just kind of hoping that they're going in the right direction. Of course, usually they are. Somebody's there that's been there before and they know which way to go, or maybe they paid more attention on the way in than you did and they know exactly where the gate is. But eventually you find the gate, and the gate is wide. And my point here is that if we are following the crowd, we are going through the wide gate. If we are following the crowd, we are going through the gate of distraction. The gate of distraction. Is that the gate we want to go through? Or do we want to go through the small gate? Do we want to find the narrow path? The path of life? The path that leads us away from the distractions? and into the experience of the presence of God. So the first thing we need to know then is that if we're following the crowd, we're probably going in the wrong direction. If tens of millions of people are all headed that way, it is probably not the way that we want to be going. Right? And I think this is what Jesus was telling people. The gate to destruction is wide. Small is the gate, and narrow is the path. And you and I are the ones who must choose. God is not choosing for us. We must choose. We have will and volition. We must choose a time and a place when we will begin and continue our spiritual practice in earnest. So first thing, if everybody's heading that way, it's probably not the way to go. Second thing, the gate to distraction opens outward. The gate to distraction is pointing out there, pointing out to the world. And it distracts us in many, many ways, but it is always out there. I read something a long time ago that says it came to us from the East. And it goes like this. When the gods were creating the earth and human beings, the gods had something very, very precious that they were afraid that human beings would discover. And if the human beings discovered it, why, this would just make the human beings as powerful as the gods. And the gods didn't want that. They wanted to hold the power to themselves. So they were kind of discussing, where is it that we're going to hide this? Where can we hide this secret so that human beings won't find it? And he said, well, we'll put it on the top of the tallest mountain. And one of the other gods said, no, that's not going to work. If we put it up there, eventually somebody will get curious and they will climb that mountain and they will find it, and then our secret will be out. And another one said, well, let's take it and let's hide it in the deepest place in the ocean. And another one said, no. They'll explore. They'll build submarines. They'll go down into the greatest depths, and sooner or later they'll find it down there. And then they thought and they said, well, let's put it in the one place that they will never look. Let's put it inside them. And of course, it's a parable. It's a teaching story. But what it's telling us is the most important thing that we can ever discover is not something that we're going to get through the five senses, looking out there. And everything about us, our eyes, our ears, everything about us is focused, everything about our senses is focused on what's out there. But the greatest treasure is within here. It doesn't come to us through the senses, the five senses. It comes to us through the sixth sense, through our intuition, through turning our mind within. So what we come to understand then is if we're following a crowd, we're going through the wide gate, and especially if we're following the crowd out into the things that are external out there. That the small gate swings inward. The small gate swings inward. And we have to turn our backs literally away from all of the distraction, and we have to go within. The Old Testament, Proverbs, we're told, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Where are we going to be still? Where are we going to know? Within. Within. Dr. Holmes tells us that the only place that we can find God is within. It's within our own consciousness. Because even the word God, when the sound lands on our ears and in our brains kind of interpret it as the word God, then something else happens. Then the concept of God that we hold is brought to mind. And from that point on, the God that we're thinking about is the God of our mind, the God of our concept. The only place that we will ever meet the divine is within our own consciousness, within our own concept of God. So the small gate swings inward. The Old Testament tells us to be still and know. The New Testament tells us to go into the secret place, go into the prayer closet, go within and find the Father within, which is what Jesus called Spirit or the divine. Right? Remember, the teaching of Jesus was about the kingdom. Go within and find the kingdom. Go within and find the kingdom. Be still and know. And from China we're told that by doing perfect non-doing, it all gets done. Be still and know. There is that within which does. There is that which in with knows. Go into the secret place and close the door to our prayer closet and be at home with the beloved. So we must follow the path through the small gate that leads inward into the still, quiet place of our consciousness. Meditation. In some of his works, Joel Goldsmith said that somebody had asked him, how long it took to achieve spiritual attainment. Excuse me while I get a drink of water. And he says, it depends on how much time you put into meditation. He says, you can read all the books you want. If you never meditate, it's not going to happen. If you meditate a half hour a day, eventually it will happen. If you meditate 5 hours a day, it'll happen sooner rather than later. And he said, really, if you are on the spiritual path and you want to make progress, the amount of time that you spend each day in meditation is kind of pointing you to your progress. That's the way that you make progress. We make progress by being still and knowing, by going within, by sitting at home with the beloved. Now he also described meditation. Of course, there's many different kinds of meditation. For those of you who were in our meditation classes, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali lay out, I think it's 113 or 111 different meditation techniques. Osho expanded on those or kind of described each of those in his Book of Wisdom, or Book of Secrets maybe. But nevertheless, there's many different ways. And Goldsmith tells us we can start with something simple, like a word, like love, like peace, like joy. And we can just meditate with that word. But we must also take a period of meditation. Now, he recommended to his students that they meditate 5 times a day. And he suggested that one of those 5 periods was just simply for the purpose of being still. No words. Just be still. Sit down. Be still. Invite the presence of the divine to make itself known. And that's it. That's it. And he said, at the end of that meditation, don't expect anything to happen. Don't try to make anything happen. Just let whatever happens, happen. Whatever happens, happen. And at the end of that meditation, to just simply affirm that through this meditation, a greater desire to know God has entered the world. And that's it. And he told his students that meditation without any words, that meditation without any purpose or intention or anything, that was their gift to the world. Breaking away from all of the drama and the distraction of the human life and just sitting and being still was his idea of a gift to the world. We find a similar idea in some of the Eastern traditions where you have the ascetics, you have the people who will go and sit in a cave and stare at a wall for years. Just allowing their minds to empty themselves of thought for years. And their idea there is that one mind, one instance of human consciousness that is not caught up in the drama is a gift. It clears up all consciousness to some degree. It's like that single drop of pure water that falls into the glass of muddy water. When enough drops of pure water have fallen in there, everything that was being held in solution is washed out, and you're left with pure water. The small gate swings inward. The crowd isn't on it. And we must take time to go within and be still. The second thing that we must remember as we are on this narrow path, as we are on this spiritual path, is not to judge by appearances. Not to judge by appearances. See, one of the great distractions in all of life is to judge by appearances. We see things as they appear to be, and we immediately get caught up in the drama, the ain't it awfuls, that we need to do something about that, This isn't right, and all of the other rallying cries that we hear. That's the wide gate. That's the wide gate. What we ultimately have to do, as Dr. Holmes tells us, what practitioners do is resolve all things to thought. All things resolve to thought. And we treat the thought. That's why he calls it a treatment. We're treating the thought. We're treating the consciousness that is the cause. So if you look at everything that is going on around us, everything that is clamoring for our attention, all of those little flashy things on the internet, all of those little messages that are embedded into commercials to try to grab our attention, the demeanor of the newscasters, all of those things which are very specifically designed to grab our attention out of the din of everything else that's going on around us, they can all be resolved to a thought. Everything can be resolved to a thought. Hunger can be resolved to a thought. Louise Hay tells us that there aren't hungry people in the world because there's a lack of food. There's a lack of love. There's a lack of love. What is the consciousness behind hunger? What is the consciousness behind poverty? What is the consciousness behind greed? What is the consciousness behind prosperity and supply? So if we think about the things that are clamoring for our attention, the threats, the wars, the rumors of wars, and all of the struggles that the human drama wants to get us engaged into, we can bring them all down to their root cause, which is the consciousness that is behind them. And then we can take a step further, and we can know that there is a consciousness of God in which everything is okay. That all of these appearances are just appearances, and we will not judge by the appearances because they are all in the process of changing anyway. They are all in the process of changing, every bit of them. So rather than get caught up in the need to struggle in the effect, what we can do is we can come back and work at the level of cause. If, as Louise Hay tells us, that there's a shortage of love, we know that that too must be an appearance, that that too must be a human choice, that that too must be an outpicturing of consciousness, because everything we see is an outpicturing of consciousness. And then we can do the thing that we can do, which is to pray affirmatively, to treat, to do the one thing that we know that changes human consciousness. Emmett Fox says the only thing that changes human consciousness is prayer. And by prayer he meant treatment, affirmative prayer. Joel Goldsmith tells us that the only thing that changes human consciousness is the contact with the divine presence. They're both saying the same thing, because affirmative prayer, effective prayer, brings our consciousness into contact with the divine reality. So we start by recognizing what God is. We start by thinking about the goodness of God as it relates to the situation. We bring ourselves into a feeling of completeness, of knowing that God is all there is and everything is perfect in God's world. And whatever the situation might be, if it is what we perceive to be a lack of love, then we bring ourselves to a complete knowing that there's no lack of love in God. It cannot be. Love is the experience of oneness. God is one with everything. God is everything. How could there be any lack of love? So the only way it could appear that there is a lack of love is if human consciousness is somehow restricting that flow of love which already exists. And what our treatment is for, the intention, the direction that we give to the power of the universe that responds to us according to our belief, is that all the illusions are now dissolved. Every and anything in consciousness that is unlike love now leaves us, now goes away. Just as the darkness goes away when the light comes, I was up before dawn this morning and watched as the sky grew light. Watching it snow, watching the snow fall, cling to the trees. And it just gradually got brighter and brighter and brighter. And there was no struggle, there was no complaint. The darkness didn't groan. It was dissipated by the light. And this is the last point that I want to come to today. So we're talking about the wide gate swings out, and it's crowded. That path is crowded, The small gate swings inward, and there's not so many on it. We find what we're looking for within by being still and knowing. We judge not by appearances. We judge by the righteous judgment. And the last piece I want to talk about today is resist not evil. Resist not evil. See, one of the great distractions that we get caught up in is we have to do something. We have to fight. We have to get caught up in the fight. We have to get caught up in the struggle. We have to do. And evil is an entity. Evil is a real entity that exists, and it needs to be destroyed. Right? We heard this a lot in the last 20 years with the wars that our country has been involved in, and with the enemies of our country who would gladly engage in war with us. And the two sides are saying pretty much the same thing. Evil exists. You don't negotiate with evil. You strike it down. And the other side is evil. And you've got two groups pointing their fingers at each other, saying exactly the same thing until it comes down to who's evil. And basically it's the we're okay but you're not school of life. So we need to step out of that. We need to back away from that, because as long as we believe that there is this thing called evil, that is a personality that exists, that needs to be put down in the form of the devil or in the form of another human being, see, then we tend to get caught up in the drama. We tend to get caught up in the struggle. And we don't resist evil. We don't resist evil. See, evil is an idea. Evil is a concept. Evil is a thought. We reduce all things to thought. And we deal with the thought by replacing it. Don't resist. Replace. Don't resist. Replace. So if we're caught up in the struggle, and if we believe that a certain group of people are evil, we must back up and recognize that they are behaving the way that they do and doing the things that they do because of the beliefs that they hold to be true. Those beliefs are nothing more than ideas, nothing more than mental constructs. And ideas and mental constructs can and do change. We start by changing our idea. We start by changing our consciousness. See, this is another big point, is everybody wants to figure out, well, how do I run through that wide gate? How do I get in the middle of all of those people who are confused, and how do I save them from themselves? And as long as we're asking that question, we're looking the wrong way. We're looking out there. We need to go back within. We need to go in the small gate. We need to go within. We need to go to the still small place, and we have to say, what is it about me? What is it about my consciousness that needs to change so I no longer see them as evil? What is it about me that I can change? I can change my consciousness. So I can recognize then that each and every person who has ever been created is an expression of God. Pray for your enemies, love your enemies, do good to those who would hurt you. It's all been said before. There's nothing new, just perhaps our understanding. But we can bring ourselves then to recognize that we are not trying to struggle against another human being, that what we are doing is we are recognizing that there is nothing but consciousness, there is nothing but thought, and we can know that which we call positive thoughts, that which we call the truth, is like the light that dispels the darkness, and the darkness doesn't struggle, it just dissipates. So what we do is we know the truth. What we do in our spiritual practices is we take time not to change them out there, but we take time to change our consciousness in here. To know that God is good. To know that goodness exists at the center of each and every human being, and that goodness is now coming forth in new and exciting ways. That whatever needs to change in human consciousness is now changing to allow for a fuller and a greater expression of the love of God, to allow for a greater experience of the presence of the divine that is already here. That is already here. The gate is small. It opens inward. The path is narrow because we have to block out all of the noise and distractions and drama around us. We do this by getting still and being still and knowing. We resolve all things down to their cause, which is a thought. And we don't resist evil. We replace the idea, which is the cause of the evil behavior. Easy to say. We can cover it all in 45 minutes. A lifetime of practice. I want to leave you with something that Ralph Waldo Trine gives us. It's a beautiful visual that he gave us in his book, In Tune with the Infinite. And he talks about, of course, he was in California, and you know that in California, water is a very, very precious commodity, and there are aqueducts that traverse the tops of the hills. And as it passes the different properties, they have a little gate. There's a valve, kind of a screw, a big handle on a corkscrew thing, and you turn it, and as you do, this gate lifts up, and it allows water to flow out of the aqueduct down into an irrigation channel into the fields. And of course people have to pay for that. So Trine talks about this man who had a property in California, and there was a beautiful stream flowing on it. And this little stream came down, and it went, and it formed a pond. And all around the pond there was life. There was plants growing in the pond. There was marsh growing on the edge of the pond. There were trees. There were birds. There were fishes. You know. And people would come, the man opened his property up, and people would come from in the city, and they would come out and they would have picnics all around this pond on the weekend. They would spread their blankets out on the lawn and get their little picnic baskets, and the children would play, you know, and some would take their shoes and socks off and go down and splash in the water. And then after the pond was filled, this little stream flowed out of the pond, and it flowed down through a meadow. And the grass all around was green because the water was irrigating the field, and the field was populated with cows, and the cows were eating the grass and giving milk, and they were very content, and it was beautiful. And the man had to go away on a business trip, and he sublet the property. And the man who was leasing the property saw that the valve on the aqueduct was open, and this stream of water was flowing through, and he realized he was paying for it. And he didn't want to do that. So he turned the valve, and he shut the gate, and the flow of water stopped. And the pond became stagnant. The weeds started to die. The whole thing started to smell terribly. The birds left, the fish died. The outflow stream ceased to flow. The green grass in the meadows turned brown and died. The soil went back to dry weeds. The cows had to leave. There was nothing to eat. And the man came back from his trip, and he saw what had happened. And he went back up to the aqueduct, and he opened the valve. And the clear water started to flow again. And eventually, life came back into the pond. The grass down in the meadow started to grow again. The birds came back. The fish came back. The people on their picnic blankets came back. The children came back. Now, the only reason that pond dried up was that there had been a restriction in the flow. And all it took for that beauty and that peace and that joy to come back was for the flow to be restored. Let's go within. Let's restore the flow, and the only place that we're going to find it is within. It's not out there. Whatever we're looking for is not out there. The gate is small, and it swings inward. And if we follow that path, we find life. We find the clear spring of life, the cool waters of life, the peace that passes understanding. And as we do this, as you and I do this, to some degree, all of human consciousness clears up. Our gift to the world is our spiritual growth. Our decision and our maintained focus on finding the presence of God within. And once we do that, see, then we find it without. But if we can't find it within, we're never going to find it out there. We have to go within. We have to be still. We have to know. So this week I invite you, take time, take some time. If you don't have any more time today, then take time tomorrow. If you can't give 20 minutes, give 10. If you can't give 10, give 5. If you can't give 5, give 1. But just take some time for no other purpose, none whatsoever. No intention, no words, no prayers, No telling God what you want. None of that. But simply be still. Say, I'm here, Lord. As Goldsmith says, your servant is listening. I am here, Lord. I am here, Lord. As Augustine said, I ask nothing of thee, not even thy love. I only want thee. Take that time. Take that time on a regular basis. And as you can, add more time to it. If you're doing a minute, do 2. If you're doing 5, do 10. If you're doing 10, do 20. If you're doing one 20-minute period a day, do 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. Increase your time in meditation. Your progress on the spiritual path, the narrow path, the one that many don't find, directly depends on how much time you spend being still. Be still and know. Go within. Close the door. That's where the kingdom is. And so it is.